Hello, welcome back. It's been a while, but now it's time to talk about things other than Dungeons and Dragons and painting miniatures. This is going to be talking about Tasha's Cauldron of everything. This is very much from the player's perspective and the player options, because there's so much stuff in this book. I'm going to have to say that I have to summarize everything. There's so much material in here. I could not do a live stream on this topic and do it justice, frankly, in one live stream. So I'm going to be summarizing as a result of my own personality. There will be some indication of what I think of the subclasses and the options here. Absolutely, that will be there. But I'm also going to be kind of a bit jestful with regard to some of the features. Not necessarily because I think they are bad or because I think they're good, just because that's just how I am. So I'm going to do this because there's a lot of things in this book that are quite amusing, and I feel that taking the opportunity, I take the piss out of everything, okay? So grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and this is going to be quite involved. I am going to definitely be opening it up for a Q&A and questions and answers near the end, so prepare for quite a lot of information. Okay, hello Nicole. Or Gabby, how's it going? Dick's Bumpkin, how's it going? And I believe there was somebody else in here. I'm going to do a poll at the same time. Aberrant, I believe it is. All right, okay, so get yourself ready. We're going to make this happen. Hello, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And the topic today is not really about training. It's going to be a player review of Tasha's Cauldron of everything. So everything I talk about is very much from the perspective of a player rather than a dungeon master. All the material that I'm going to discuss is not really dungeon master tools. It is all very much around the player. And the reason for this is because the book is so dense that I could not possibly cover everything in one single live stream. That means there will be a Dungeon Master version. This is for the players. I have had reservations about this book for a long time. I have taken the time to go through everything, and I have come to the conclusion that I may have been wrong about some of the things that I thought about this book. So this is the day that I try to correct all of that. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm going to run a poll to get an idea of what you guys have been doing. Like, what have people been doing? Men, women, everybody. Like, I want to know how you're using this book, or even if you are using this book. So I'm going to run a poll. Feel free to take part, okay? If you don't want to take part in it, that's fine too. So the first thing I'm going to have to say is that given that I have not given it a fair deal and probably not taken the time to go through it very, very carefully, because it took me a long time to do so, there are some things I need to say. And the reality is that I probably had made a few mistakes with my discussion about this book in the past and other live streams. So I'm going to say I was wrong in some cases with regard to this book. Now let's go into the meat and potatoes, because I have about 4 pages of notes, which frankly could have been a lot more. So I'm going to summarize as best I can. So, as I said, this is a review of Tasha's Cauldron of everything. I would say the ultimate Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 player supplement. You may have noticed I've said 5.5 because honestly, I believe this is 5.5. Now, Wizards of the Coast is not saying that, but I think that's really what we're looking at. This book is actually awesome for people playing characters in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. If you're playing a character, this is the book you want. If you've got the Player's Handbook, this is the next book you want. Even Xanathars can't keep up with this thing. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll explain. Now, this is provided that your Dungeon Master hasn't banned the book or some of the content inside the book, or you're playing Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League games. Now, Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League games do not restrict anything, but if you're playing in a home group, your Dungeon Master may restrict this. So this would not be the book. So make sure they are allowing the stuff in this book before you go and buy it, or even before you even consider trying to use stuff. The cover art is mysterious with a witch brewing something in a pot, cauldron. Although I have to say I prefer the the chaotic and bizarre images of the alternative cover art that I saw. The interior artwork, I have to say, is mostly cartoonish, lifeless, and boring for character subclasses and classes, in my opinion. But there are some excellent images and pieces near the back of the book that are related to the Dungeon Master material, which is a shame. I do feel like the character stuff should have had some decent artwork, and I don't feel like it did a very good job in this case. This is a very short book compared to other books that Wizards of the Coast has put out. There's only 192 pages. So you're paying full price for a book that has 192 pages. But if you're a player, there's a lot of material in here, so you're probably getting your money's worth even though the book is kind of short. Although the book's contents are presented as optional, you may find a lot of people don't feel that it is optional, but all the book's contents are presented as optional for playing in Dungeons & Dragons. They're not necessarily going to be optional if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League, because there's the option to do it, but it's not like you can stop. It's not like a Dungeon Master can stop you playing this content in a public game. So even though it is considered optional. The majority of the material is definitely for players with superior classes, options, subclasses, mechanics, some of which appear to have not been play tested particularly well. I would say inadequate play testing in some cases, which has left a few holes and probably going to create a few problems for anybody wanting to play these classes, which is a shame. What is presented is power creep or galloping, I would say, with some unsurprisingly overpowered subclass options and some perfectly reasonable options as well. There's a mixture. There's some stuff that's way too powerful and too good, and some stuff that's perfectly fine. In some cases, some people might say inadequate. 10 commonly asked questions are clarified initially to reduce the designer's stream of social media questions. These are the 10 most common questions that people pose with regard to playing the game as a character, and often sometimes as a dungeon master. There's a new approach to customizing the character origins, races, or lineages. I don't know which one to call them nowadays, frankly. It is detailed with ultimate flexibility around ability score increases. So where you put your increase in your ability scores, you have ultimate flexibility. You can do pretty much anything you like. There are some restrictions, but there are hardly any. Then you get a lot of flexibility around assigning the languages for your lineage or race or origin. Proficiencies, you can move that around. Skills, and there's also included a custom lineage. Some of this is going to kind of change with new book releases, but I think this is kind of where we are at this present time. All of the spellcasting classes get expanded spell lists, which means that all of the spellcasters become more powerful essentially, making them more versatile and powerful, and I would say more powerful than the martial classes as a result of this. While half-casters get 2 cantrips and access to a few more spells. So expanded spell lists, and then half-casters that didn't get cantrips now get 2 cantrips, basically. The overall complicated Artificer class has been completely reprinted with 4 subclasses incorporating it into the whole Dungeons & Dragons multiverse for public Adventurers League games. So you don't need to worry about things being setting specific. This is why the Artificer is printed here, specifically so that people could access it and didn't have to worry about playing in an Aberrant campaign. Now you can use the Artificer wherever you are. Now, that's with public Adventurers League games. In your own game, that might be a bit different because your Dungeon Master will make a call on that. I would say the Artificer classes have mostly all right combat features for the Armourer, which is basically you can play Iron Man. The Artillerist, which is basically you get a magic gun or cannon. The Battlesmith, which I could only describe as being a character class or subclass that has a Steel Predator pet. And then you get the Alchemist getting supporting abilities, which a lot of people do not like the Alchemist for various reasons, because it is a supporting role rather than what they had envisaged, possibly something from previous versions of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, from what I can see. So there's a big mix there. I don't want to comment too much on them because I feel like it is one of those subclasses and classes that is so complicated, it can be a little bit hard to deal with, but it's very, very popular. The best thing I would say about the Artificer is the magical infusions that allow the class to make magic items. These can be items, these can be weapons, armor, and they can do so at level 2, as low as level 2. Which is also why a lot of Dungeon Masters will try to ban it, but they can't ban it if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League. Now, there's a reason why Dungeon Masters are likely to be trying to ban something that allows for access to magic items at such a low level, because most Dungeon Masters are not trying to bring that into their game at that level, and so it does create a bit of animosity. So bear in mind that when you present this to a Dungeon Master, you may need to do a bit of wangling to make this work, and I don't mean bribery with pizza, although you could do that. Food and drink might work. The combat-heavy Barbarian class gets 2 new, really unusual subclasses that actually offer great exploration and utility options. I'm most surprised by these subclasses particularly. I've already talked about them in previous videos, or at least I've talked about one of them. The path of the Beast Barbarian is narratively and I would say mechanically original, with a bite, a claw, and a tail attack, plus some really awesome exploration features called Bestial Soul. And you basically get improved climbing, swimming, and jumping. Now, a lot of climbing takes place in Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot of swimming, not a lot of jumping, but frankly, it's still a really good feature, and I would say the standout feature for me, even though the bite, the claw, and the tail is very useful for making attacks and doing other things, potentially. The path of the wild magic barbarian is bonkers crazy, with like magical abilities such as essentially detecting magic and better, more regular wild surge tables. So you get a table on this thing, and I would say it's better than the sorcerer. If you're a wild magic sorcerer, it's not so great, but if you look at the wild magic barbarian, my gosh, it is amazing in comparison, and all of the features are benefits rather than disadvantages. Possibly not as much fun or as entertaining as the sorcerer, but then the sorcerer's features didn't used to come up that often anyway, not unless you don't worry about the 20-sided dice rolling. Anyway, now I would say the versatile bard gets 2 new subclasses that are odd, but refreshing, I have to say, to see more exploration and certainly a stronger focus on non-player character interactions. That's center stage, like exploration and NPC interaction is center stage for these subclasses generally, I would say. I just need to drink some water. Pardon me. The College of Creation Bard is narratively bizarre, combined with undertones of Disney, granting an unlimited sort of toolbox of features and abilities, and a dancing, singing, animated object or item, weapon, piece of furniture, I suppose, that flies and attacks. It's very Disney. It's very unusual. The College of Eloquence Bard is the master of social interactions, reducing, I would say, the charisma ability check failure possibilities, communicating in pretty much any language, and with, I would say, probably the most outstanding bardic inspiration control mechanics I have seen. Like, you can do just about anything you like with bardic inspiration with the College of Eloquence. which is always a very nice feature to have. You know, when those restrictions are pulled away, then it opens things up to something other than your standard things we normally used to do. The Holy Cleric gets 3 new subclasses that I would say border on godlike game obliterating powers. I'm going to be quite ruthless. I like clerics, but these are quite possibly not well play tested and not well thought out. And they're certainly the sorts of things you will want to multi-class with, because you pick up a lot of the best features in the first or second level, and that's it. The Order Domain Cleric is competition for war priests, sorcerer, metamagic, bards, and I would also, they get heavy armor. Like, they have proficiency in heavy armor. Now, a lot of people have said, like, previous clerics have had heavy armor anyway. What's the big deal? But heavy armor is a big deal for any kind of cleric. Not every cleric gets heavy armor as a proficiency right out the bat. Your allies get a reaction attack, given the right circumstances. You can reduce the enchantment spell casting time. So if you've got an enchantment spell and it's an action, you can take that down to a bonus action, which can be very useful. And probably one of the most awesome and kind of refreshing. I don't mind this at all. They can basically bamboozle a crowd of enemies. Like quite a large crowd, frankly, depending on how close they are. Which means that fighting may never take place. I frankly don't mind that in the slightest. That feature is fine with me, and it's a higher level feature anyway. The Peace Domain Cleric is terrifying in its, I would say, busted party gang-banging mechanics with emboldening bond. This emboldening bond will rip through the monsters and probably rip them apart at level 1, like, because you're getting it at level 1. It is probably the only feature I need to talk about with regard to the Peace Domain, because it's the one that stands out the most. There's nothing particularly wrong with anything else, but this is the one that frightens me the most, and I would say calling it the Peace Domain is kind of strange. I would certainly have called it the War Domain, but then we already had a War Domain. But we've got to call it something else. I don't know, Destruction Domain? I mean, I don't know what else to call it. But it is bonkers crazy. I can understand if you're having trouble getting your Dungeon Master to allow you to play the Peace Domain. Now, the Twilight Domain Cleric is potentially an unstoppable night sniper commando leader with super dark vision, up to 300 feet. Then they also get sort of like a mega Paladin aura as well for flight. They get flight. Eyes of Night means that the monsters are going to be dead before they even know anybody's there or nearby, because you can use this with not just yourself but also your party members. They will see the monsters well before the monsters even know you're there, and then they'll be dead, particularly if everybody takes sharpshooter and has ranged attacks. And this is probably one of the subclasses that you're going to have the most trouble getting a Dungeon Master to actually accept, because I can totally understand. You could not build an encounter to deal with them unless you only have passageways and rooms that are 60 feet long, and that's it. And that's the only kind of campaign you run. Or you stick everything behind total cover so they can't be seen even if it is dark. The Underestimated Druid gets 3 subclasses that finally gets a temporary animal companion, but is a mixed bag of useful and quite silly abilities, in my opinion. And of course, all of this is just my opinion. The Circle of Spores Druid is very confusing narratively and mechanically, I found. But you can poop out spores that do stuff, and you can make a weak sort of fungus zombie friend that follows you around and does stuff. The Circle of Stars Druid is the flying ghost machine gun spellcaster wearing a pimped out Bless or Bane aura, jacket of some kind, I guess, with, I would say, starry map and starry form kicking butt at level 2. This is the sort of thing that you would definitely want to be multi-classing into, because you get all the best features very early on. And there's frankly nothing wrong with the rest of the features with this particular subclass. But if you wanted to go into something else, it's very easy to do. You only need to take about 2 levels and you've got what you wanted. The Circle of Wildfire Druid is obsessed with fire and healing, including an insane, I would say, a wildfire spirit companion that does almost everything, including save your life. It does so much. It is like the key aspect to this entire subclass, that wildfire spirit companion. The simple fighter class gets 2 new complex subclasses with a bunch, was it a bunch, or I would say a bucket load? Say a bucket load of new fighting styles and maneuvers, including unarmed fighting that makes monks look quite incompetent. I can see why monk players, or people who like playing monks, are upset by this particular development. It's incredibly bizarre that it took place. Playtesting, maybe not going by. I mean, who knows why they decided to do this? Why make a fighter with unarmed fighting better than a monk? Well, WotC did it. The Psi Warrior fighter channels psychic power very efficiently to form shields, fly, propel weapons, and use telekinetic movement. They can use telekinetic movement on pretty much anything. It doesn't matter what it is. They can move most things around fairly easily. I can understand why a lot of people are looking forward to playing this class too, because it does sort of give the feel of an individual who has the ability to be sort of like Jean Grey, but psychic powers don't really feel any different from the magic spells that are involved in this game, unfortunately. Something that WotC hasn't really figured out, I believe. The Rune Knight fighter, look, the Rune Knight fighter gets extremely complex features, and they try to strike a balance between all the pillars of gameplay, okay? Exploration, social interaction, and combat. And they do this through Rune Carver feature, and also they've also got a Giant's Might, which basically means that they can grow. This is the backbone of the whole subclass, is Giant's Might and the Rune Carver. I wouldn't say that you could necessarily multi-class into this and make it work. It may be better to simply stick to that particular subclass, because those features are kind of a little bit scattered. Not a huge amount, but yeah, not as easy as some of the other subclasses, if I remember right. Now, the Disciplined Monk, one of my favourite classes, gets 2 new subclasses that are narratively and mechanically odd. Again, there's a lot of odd stuff here, while also being key-hungry puzzles. Like, I don't understand why they do this. Like, why does every feature that a monk have to use key? Because, Fred, that's the resource they have. Really? Really? Is that how we're going to talk? I mean, I don't know. Okay, I have a personal bias when Wizards of the Coast does anything with this. Frankly, I get frustrated more often than not when they do anything with a monk. And then there's also the question of, will we just see mountain dwarves everywhere? Okay, all right. I've had my little jest. I will continue moving on. I am going to lose my voice, so I'm going to have to put a strepsil in here to keep the throat from disappearing on me. Now, the Way of the Mercy Monk hides behind a mask while healing their allies and beating enemies to a pulp, and they're doing this with Hand of Healing and Hand of Harm. And they just grow more versatile and more powerful the higher the level you go, which is not a bad thing. I actually don't have a problem with this particular monk subclass. I think it's one of the more original and unusual ones. There are some aspects to it that I just don't understand. Maybe it's me. Maybe it was Wizards of the Coast who missed the mark. I don't know. But mechanically, it's very interesting and very good, frankly, for a monk. The Way of the Astral Self monk sports a ghostly body, mask, and arms that try to sort of cover all of the game pillars to a certain extent, but not exactly. And I don't know if they cover them equally. I don't know that they are equal. I think they are aspects of the different pillars, but not exactly. While sucking down ki, it goes down the drain hole and disappears as quickly as possible. And it still misses the thematic point. I feel like a lot of the mechanics behind this make it almost unusable. I do not understand this particular monk myself. I'm not going to say too much about it because I'm more upset that I didn't get what I wanted from this rather than what I got, frankly. And I like playing monks. Now, the Honourable Paladin class gets 2 new subclasses that take some of the best features of the fighter, the cleric, and the wizard that they have, and that manages to make failed demigod warriors. Like, how was that possible? You get some of the best features from the fighter, the cleric, and the wizard, and you put them together, and somehow it doesn't make sense. No, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying that they would have been like demigods, but they just didn't quite get there, which is probably a good thing too. You don't really want a demigod running around in your game if you can help it. Although if you're a player, that's not an issue for you, is it? Now, the Oath of Glory Paladin seems to be a combination of Hulk Hogan, where you can lift things that are really heavy, the Flash, where you can move very fast, and Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Where you protect your party members in some way. The result is a non-combat paladin. That's the only way I can describe it. Based on the kinds of features you get, it's a non-combat paladin. You may be wondering, like, how is that possible? I think this particular subclass is for a particular type of player. I don't think there'll be a lot of people who will be into this sort of thing, but I think there are some people who will understand what they were getting into when they pick this up. Now, the Oath of the Watcher Paladin, their defensive spells and abilities are overshadowed by the aura of the Sentinel, where the whole party attacks monsters first with a sizable bonus to initiative at level 7. Now, it doesn't come into play until level 7, but at that point, the bonuses you're getting are not a +2. Okay? Even a +2 is pretty good for everybody in the entire party to have. You're going to be getting at least a +3. Probably more, okay? Because who knows, you may have multi-classed into fighter, so you can get action surge or second wind or something like that. So for me, when I see this, I think at this point, this subclass becomes somewhat broken. And actually it means that the chances are you cannot be surprised easily. You're always going to be, probably the majority of the party will be going before the Dungeon Master. So I think that Dungeon Masters, you may find that Dungeon Masters are fine with the character being played up to about level 6, and when you get to level 7, they'll have issues. Or they might just outright ban it. But before that, I don't know that I would say that it's a big issue. I think it's really that one feature. That aura of the Sentinel is just a little bit much. Still very good if you're able to use it, and somebody who's willing to have that in the game. The Worldly Exploring Ranger class gets 2 new subclasses that are very strange narratively. Again, lots of odd and strange going on, and offer a band-aid to the Beastmaster, but give some huge buffs. Like, you get a lot of buffs to the Ranger. The Fey Wanderer Ranger is designed to avoid and escape combat, which may confuse a few people with teleportation and beguiling hand solo charms, basically, that will have more people complaining about their combat effectiveness. I would see a lot of people picking this up and saying, this is terrible. But this particular subclass is designed to avoid combat at all costs, rather than engage in it. That doesn't mean you will lose out on experience points. If you've got a Dungeon Master who awards experience points or advancement based on dealing with a situation rather than just butchering everything, this is actually fine. The swarmkeeper ranges creepy critters, nibble away at their enemies while moving, dragging, teleporting and flying the ranger anywhere, with, I would say, the gathered swarm feature expanding its unconventional approach. Like, this just continues to expand as you gain more levels. Now let's talk about this. The revised Beastmaster Ranger Companion. It basically becomes a character level or leveling animal spirit that you summon. Rather than an animal, it's a spirit. It's very complex. It's rather confusing. I would say the action economy around it is extremely confusing. I read it 3 times. I still don't really understand it fully. Maybe that's because I'm not bright enough to figure it out. But I think it will annoy a lot of people. I think many people will be annoyed by this revision. It's only gone part way and it didn't go far enough to actually clean things up properly. The Cunning Rogue class gets 2 new subclasses that confirm to everybody that they should be feared for their dark powers. Like, frankly, I mean, Rangers were always terrifying to a certain degree, but these ones are truly terrifying. The Phantom Rogue is the ultimate skill monkey that kills bystanders by screaming, screaming with ghosts. Like this is how we deal with bystanders. We scream. We kill our bystanders by screaming with ghosts. It collects souls. It speaks with the dead, and it walks the ethereal plane or realm. I have to say that as a subclass, I think a lot of the ideas behind it really do hit the key features that are needed, particularly at high level. I don't know that the order's quite right as far as I'm concerned. I would have preferred this subclass to be able to speak with the dead sooner rather than later. The collecting souls thing is really peculiar. I think a few people might have trouble with that, but it's still a very interesting way to approach things. Still, I find myself struggling to understand a lot of the Phantom Rogue with regard to sort of like what's going on here. Now, the Soulknife Rogue is covering all of the pillars of play with a bonus to skill checks. You get telepathy, you get teleportation, you get invisibility while dual wielding magic weapons that can be, well, they can eventually stun your victims. Like, the Soulknife Rogue is a frightening subclass just because of what's been built into it. The Mysterious Sorcerer class gets 2 new subclasses that reinforce that all sorcerers are strange multiverse freaks, I would say, and are beyond terrifying near retirement, which basically means all of their best features are almost near the end of the character class progression, which will probably annoy a few people, but let's go into this. The Aberrant Mind Sorcerer is wrapped in a sort of a second-hand tentacles feature that grants very shoddy telepathy, subtle psionic spells, but near retirement gets like an exploration trump card feature and teleportation explosions. You want to teleport and have an explosion occur at the same time? Well, now you can do it. But it's very near the end of the progression of the class, so not necessarily going to be seen very often, unfortunately. Although it is fitting for high level play, if you ask me. The Clockwork Soul Sorcerer is a mechanical dice rolling defense cube, I think, or a beach ball of some kind that gets the best war toys last. So all of the war toys that should have probably been presented near the beginning of it, and then all the other stuff that should have been sort of applying more to sort of the other pillars. Well, yeah, there's no love for the 3 pillars in Dungeons and Dragons for the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. It's all very much combat focused. The Devilish Warlock class gets 2 new subclasses that make fantasy adventuring life seem quite mundane, frankly, with tentacles and tiny living spaces. And I will explain. The fathomless Warlock is sort of like part fish and angry octopus that is more at home underwater, so very good if you're playing in an underwater campaign, with the option to drag the party into a private teleporting swimming pool, apparently. I actually think that this gets most of what needs to happen right, certainly at the tail end of the class. Maybe not necessarily at the beginning of the class, but I would say I'm very pleased with what they did with the tail end of the subclass, which you're probably never going to get to use. I mean, you're never probably going to get an opportunity to teleport your party around with you in a swimming pool. Like, it's kind of fun. It's kind of weird, but it's appropriate for high-level play. The Genie Warlock doesn't suffer from demigod envy in any way, shape, or form. It is equipped with a Genie bottle. Exactly. You can get up to a lot of shenanigans with that. Flight, a portable vacation plane for your friends when things get rough, and limited wish. And yes, you do get access to the wish spell. You do get it. You do get access to the wish spell, which fortunately is a good thing. I mean, it would be terrible to get limited wish, which isn't actually the wish spell, but you do get access to the wish spell. This is one subclass that I can see possibly being just a little bit too good in some respects. It would be very easy to abuse, and you wouldn't even have to multi-class. You wouldn't have to do very much to it. It would take a creative individual, but I could already think of the sorts of shenanigans I could get up to having a ring as my Genie bottle, and then getting myself and my party in there. And then, of course, some silly monster's going to pick it up, put the ring on, and I can listen to everything they're saying, infiltrate anywhere I want to go. Yeah, I could see there being a lot of situations arise with that particular subclass. Now, the self-proclaimed all-powerful wizard class gets 2 new subclasses that I would say break all the rules of wizards, while making everything much easier, frankly. The bladesinger wizard, look, it's a lunatic. This bladesinging wizard is a lunatic. It has the ability to dance around in the front line with the fighters. Well, I would say it could just yell out, "What's so hard about doing this?" Look, seriously, most of the best features are at level 2. And that blade song at level 2 is the center stage aspect of the whole subclass. It does so much. It would be very easy for somebody to consider multi-classing with this because of this very fact. What would you multi-class into? Well, what wouldn't you multi-class into? You could pretty much go any direction you wanted, but you wouldn't even need to, really. Now, I am currently playing the Order of Scribes Wizard. So the Order of Scribes Wizard, finally, you'll be able to write every single spell into this extra dimensional spell book with a magical quill if you can find any new spell scrolls or unwanted spell books lying around in dungeons. We've been wanting to do this for a long time. If you play a wizard, you want to do this. You can manifest a spectral arcane eye. And if you've got any idea, it's not called that, but basically it's like Arcane Eye. You can cast spells from it. You can use it for infiltration and recon. Arcane Eye, or a feature like that, is hugely useful in the game. It will break down any dungeon and location so easily it's not funny. Then the ability to craft spells more quickly is there, which is great. And you can actually like sacrifice spells that you don't want to use to save your own bacon as the wizard. I'm playing it right now, and I finding that depending on the type of campaign, it might not be that great. If you're playing in a campaign where you can't get access to spell scrolls or spell books, it's going to suck. But if you can, it's going to rock. That's my opinion on that. Now, the feat options are all half feats. They offer, I would say they're offering more options, trying to grant abilities or capabilities that other classes have as a key feature, so that players don't have to multi-class or don't want to have to multi-class. They can use these. But they are underwhelming in utility compared to the player's handbook. I would say the vast majority of the feats aren't that great. Now, there are some exceptions. The new feats grant a +1 to a specific ability score. Usually you do not get to choose, but this is quite normal. This happens with a lot of the other feats that you get in Dungeons & Dragons in the player's handbook. And then you get a few lackluster features. Although, I would have to say that the chef, the gunner, and the poisoner are quite unique. And those are probably the only 3 feats that I considered even worth looking at. The rest of them, I wasn't that impressed by. The Group Patrons Guide offers a party of characters a way to connect each other really well through, and it's really well thought out, I would say. It's taken from a previous book. It's taken from Aberrant, that source book. But it connects them narratively, and it connects them mechanically. So you get some mechanical perks for actually doing this. So my advice to you is get everybody on the same page in your party and pick a group patron and say, Dungeon Master, can we have a group patron? We'll all be part of the same, have the same group patron. Group patrons, you're not supposed to have separate group patrons in a group. If you're going to use it, everybody in the group needs to agree on the same patron. Okay, otherwise it doesn't work. And your Dungeon Master's probably not going to let you use it. So, which makes perfect sense, because that's why it's called group patron. Each group patron covers a list of types of patrons you might be dealing with, the benefits you would get, contacts you might have, the roles, and also potential quests that you might take part in. So there's some benefits, but there's some stuff that's tied to it that you might have to go and do to keep your patron. Otherwise, the patron might be no longer willing to offer those particular perks. In fact, it actually details the fact that there are things you need to do to keep the perks you get from your group patron, which is a very good consequence. I was very impressed. There are 8 group patrons offered, including the option to make your own patron. So you could be your own patron. I don't know that I necessarily like that much, but I've done that in my own campaigns and just recently, and actually it can work. It really comes down to the people who are playing in your group, whether it's going to work or whether it's going to just turn into a complete mess. So the types of patron you can have an academy, you could have an ancient being as your patron, an aristocrat could be your patron, there's a criminal syndicate, a guild possibly, or a military force, a religious order, or a sovereign. So it covers all the basics that you might be looking for. I think that covers pretty much everything. The new spells are a collection of, I would say, reprints, junk. There's some pretty hoary junk in there. Clearly defined summoning spells by different creature type are in here, so that there's no confusion and arguing with yourself and your Dungeon Master, with a few complex, mind-blowing, reality-twisting conjurations or conjurings. The spells Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, and Lightning Lure are nerfed, updated reprints. I was never that fond of any of those spells myself anyway, so if they were one of your favorites, you're probably not going to like the changes you see in this book. The outstanding spells have to be, for me, Dream of the Blue Veil, which essentially allows you to travel to another world through dreams. Like, that's so cool. Tasha's Otherworldly Guise, you can disguise yourself. disguise, right? Got it. And then the cantrip Mind Sliver. And it's a cantrip, and it gives you quite a lot of very useful features to it, but you have to use it in conjunction with another spell. The spell alone, it's really a buff for another spell. That's what you're using it for, okay? And there's a section on customizing and personalizing the spell appearance, which is good to see. I think that a lot of people really like doing this sort of thing. It's a very small section. I've done a video on the topic already, and I think that it sort of stands out to me as being one of the better aspects of it. The new magic items are heavily targeted at spellcasters rather than melee characters. There are books, crystal shards, a lot of spell casting focuses. There's some very complex artifacts and some very unimaginative magical tattoos. I have to say it, I would say a lot of them are very unimaginative. The magic tattoos should have been the crowning star, right? Instead, it's the usual combat benefits with a few minor common tattoos that offer novelty features. Now, these common magic tattoos that have novelty features are the ones that stood out to me the most. The Illuminator was one, and the Masquerade tattoo was another. Okay, one is essentially the ability to write, and the other one is essentially Masquerade is to disguise and using a tattoo. They're not particularly powerful features, but they're there. And they're the only ones that I really sort of thought were worth mentioning. All of the magic items are good in this book. Right? All of the magic items are good, but the really interesting ones are the artifacts that can drive the entire campaign. Like if a dungeon master decides to incorporate them into your campaign, they are the story, just as the One Ring is in Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of stuff here that's really, really good. Like Baba Yaga's Mortar and Pestle would be a good example. And the Demonomicron, I think that's right. That's another one that sort of stands out. There's two others. I'm not going to mention them. They're all good. All the artifacts, they're really complicated. They're very impressive. There's even a cursed magic item in here that you can uncurse, that's like there's a story there. There's a story for your characters to play out. The sidekick rules are a great idea and well presented. They cover classes like, and these are not sort of your standard player classes. They're like the warrior, the expert, and the spellcaster. The warrior is your up-close fighter. Your expert is somebody who does a lot with skills, okay, like your rogue. And then your spellcaster covers healing and sort of arcane damage dealing stuff. They're very, very basic. They're very, very easy to use. The sidekick rules also provide guidance on customizing anything into a sidekick. Now, you're going to need Dungeon Master sign off on all of this because there's a lot that requires this to work with their approval, okay? Sidekicks are perfect for filling out a small group. If you have a small group of players and you just don't have the numbers, it's going to be great. Or for people who need less complex characters to play and still keep up with the other players. Now, you won't necessarily stay up completely with them because you just don't get as much, but they're a lot easier to run. So I think they would be very useful if you're starting out and you're struggling, or if you're dealing with somebody who is a much younger. So children might find just playing a sidekick very, very handy rather than a full-blown character. Now, the mechanics in this book are heavily influenced by Dungeons & Dragons 4e. I know this because I played Dungeons & Dragons 4e as a player, and I ran it as a dungeon master. And I did so for quite some time. And I ran it in public games. So I am aware of what they're doing here. I find this highly amusing considering 4e was somewhat of a disaster for Wizards of the Coast. And yet we see stuff that is being brought back from that particular edition into this book. Now, some of you who have never played 4e or older versions of the game will not notice this, and you won't know. But I've noticed it. Now, what does that ultimately mean to anybody who's interested in this book? Look, if you are a player and you can use the contents in this book with your dungeon master, you want this book. You really do. If you're a dungeon master, this is really a player book. I don't really think there's very much in here that you will find useful, and that's unfortunate. And I will talk about the dungeon master tools in another video, another live stream. So if you found this useful in some way, fantastic. I have hundreds of videos that cover Dungeons and Dragons, and in fact for players and dungeon masters, and I have a few videos on various aspects of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, where I go specifically into a subclass or a particular feature that's in the book. If you are interested, you can go and check those out. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content, well, the easiest way to do that is through Patreon. The Amazon affiliate links down in the description, the merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos, or just watch my videos, that's fine too. Make sure to do the usual YouTube things like share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm coming back. I'm not gone. Right, so I'm going to get the book out. We're going to have a discussion. I do have a Dungeon Master round table today. Let's have a quick look at this poll before we start talking about the stuff. Now, you got to understand, this is a review, okay? Like all reviews, they are up, and it's just an opinion. If there's something that you disagree with, that's fine, okay? I'm just giving you my opinion. The only thing that I have actually tried out in this book are sidekicks and the order of the scribe. Okay, wizard. That's the only thing that I've used. So it's not like I have play tested this stuff myself. This is really just me looking at it and then making an assessment based on my experience. And frankly, most of the time, that's all people are doing on YouTube anyway, when they do these things. I took days and days and days to break it all down for myself. It took me a long time to understand what was going on. I need a drink of water. That was 4 pages of summary. Right, so let's get the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything book up onto my desk. Let's move that out of the way. And let's have a look at this poll. So, have you used Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in your Dungeons and Dragons 5e games? Now, we've got 71% some stuff. Okay, not everything, but some of it. 10% yes, everything. Okay. 14% no. Okay, so look, not that long ago, I was in the no area. Like, you know, none of the player stuff I was using at all in a game with my home group. So I've only just started to integrate it. And I'm not even the dungeon master, it's somebody else who's dungeon mastering. And I did actually open up the option to use the beast path for the barbarian, and nobody really wanted to pick it up, which is fine. And then we've got 5% who are undecided. So I'm going to leave that poll going so that people can keep commenting, and I'm going to sort of pick out the things that sort of stand out for me. Now, this is your opportunity to ask questions. If you have any questions about the book that you think I might be able to answer, or you're interested in hearing feedback on, the time is now rather than later. I know I've taken a lot of time to talk. Oh my gosh. The chat just updated. It looked completely empty to me a second ago, and now it's full. So now I need to go through the chat. Holy Toledo. I'm going to try to do this quickly. Please go hashtag question so I don't miss you. If you do that, then I won't miss you, okay? So Nicola says, she reckons that the soulknife and Psy Warrior should not have their psychic powers scaled based on their proficiency bonus. I'm inclined to feel like the proficiency bonus is not a particularly good way of figuring out how often to use something. I've never been a fan of an ability that is got a limitation. And And I guess that's partly because recently I've discovered that Vancine magic is a creation of Gary Gygax, and Dave Arneson never really looked at Vancine magic in his game as a thing. As far as I could tell from the research, I've been doing a lot of research on those two recently for the upcoming Dungeon Master roundtable I'm doing today with AJ Pickett, Wally DM, Dungeon Dad, and Flute Sleuts. So, yeah. Bumpkin, how's it going? Hello, Todd, how's it going? Dark Winter, good evening. It's actually morning for me. What? It should be based on twice their int modifier and +2 at level 17. Nicola, I mean, I'm not a game designer. Frankly, I don't really get involved in that sort of thing. I'm not going to make my position on features for all classes, whether they are spellcasters or they are martial, is that they should be able to use their features as often as they like. And if you're making something that can only be used a certain number of times per day, why is it there? I do not like that kind of concept behind it. I see I see a necessity, yes, to put limits on the number of spells at higher level being cast. So maybe that's the only thing that I would sort of let go of. But everything else, I feel like if you could use it, you should be able to use it all the time. And if you shouldn't be able to use it all the time, then why is it there? That's just me. My biased, okay? Ramiro, how's it going? Todd, you don't have this book? Well, you don't have to have this book. I do these reviews because I know a lot of you want me to talk about the topic, and you know that I will be quite blunt about what I have to say. Yeah, dipping their toes, that's the way. Now, I'm going to probably butcher this name. Tiago Livius. Look, I'm sorry. You're from Brazil. I am sorry if I made it. Look, I'm sure I pronounced your name terribly. You got a lot of good ideas from my videos? Oh, good. The creative use of shaped water. Yes, I still need to still finish Druidcraft and Prestidigitation. But I'm not going to do them until I'm ready. I want it to be complete in every way. You fully agree, Ramiro, on the art? Yeah. Look, it's unfortunate, but I do feel like that's the case. Fred, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. The orc lady is amazing. She is super ripped and looks like a warrior, while also being pretty at the same time. Look, I'm not saying that I dislike having an orc lady, because I love playing half orcs and orcs. So that's actually not a problem for me. I just felt like, even if she's ripped, I just feel like it's too cartoony. I really wanted something else. And maybe that's because I grew up on a lot of the older artwork rather than the new style of artwork. I do miss Brom. I do miss a lot of the older style art that came out, that was oil painting and stuff like that. And now with the watercolors, I do not dislike the watercolors in the Monster Manual. I do not like the idea that they're using watercolors in their books now, but there are just times where I just feel like it's either been generated on a computer and it just doesn't look right to me, and I just don't find it evocative. It can be your favorite. We do not need to agree on this, Gabby. It's all right. The artillerist not scaling. Look, everybody thinks that everything should scale, and sometimes scaling is unimportant. I don't really get caught up with scaling with everything. I think a lot of people assume that everything should scale. Damage dealing spells, maybe yes. Damage dealing abilities, maybe yes. But the artillerist is, not the artillerist, the alchemist, the alchemist is clearly a supporting role. And as a supporting role, it is just not going to suit a lot of people. Do I think it's probably weaker than the other subclasses for the Artificer? Yeah, I would agree. It probably is. Yes, it could have been better. Experience Vietnam. Chris, how's it going? Yes, Tasha's, that's right. You love the wild magic Barbarian. I think it is I wish that the wild magic sorcerer was more like this. I'm fine with them keeping the detrimental chart aspects for the wild magic sorcerer, but I wish that you could roll on that chart more often in the standard rolls in the player's handbook. And what Tasha's does for the wild magic barbarian is exactly what they should have done for the player's handbook. It's awesome. It's great. It's fun. They could have even thrown in some detrimental effects, and that would have been random but still entertaining to some degree. Hello, Sean. Hit the like button. Thank you very much, Sean, for the promotion. That's good news. Look, there's a lot of stuff in here that does what I've been saying all along, that Dungeons and Dragons subclasses need to have more than just combat features. And a lot of these subclasses have role-playing, exploration, and social interaction aspects to them that make them look weaker in combat, because they may well be, but they may not ever get into combat. They can circumvent that and still get the experience points and save you having to, waste spells and slice and dice. He may in fact wind up forming a new friendship with somebody with some of the abilities in here. And I think that's not something we need to discourage. I think Dave Arneson would be very pleased by some of the stuff in here. Maybe not pleased by everything, but certainly some of it. Gabby, what do you got here? There are only 8 options, I realise. Look, there is some randomness to it, yes. And yes, it is not something that you can tie down specifically. You're quite right. I know you're talking about the wild magic barbarian, those 8 options, and I know there's some variation, which means you can't necessarily plan everything out exactly the way you want. I totally get that, but it's fitting for what it does, and most of those features are still very useful. Look, Trent Monk did point out there are times where it may just backfire on you or be useless to you, and that's probably true. See, for me, I am not that keen on playing a barbarian. Even the totem bear barbarian seems to be the way we go, right? The totem barbarian is the way to go, right? And it's always the bear. Blah, 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 blah. It's really good, but I actually like this probably more. I think it really opens things up. Order is not new. It came out back in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which came out in 2017. Okay. I'm not saying that it is new. I believe they made some adjustments to it. For me, having taken it out of Ravnica is nice. I really like the subclass, but I do understand that in the wrong campaign, it will penalize you big time. I am currently in a pirate-themed campaign, and we're on a pirate ship. We're not near shops. We very rarely find spell scrolls or magic books, spell books. So I'm really hamstringed big time. It doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter the fact that I can get all those spells into my spell book in no time whatsoever. It's just not working out. So I do understand that there are going to be problems with it. You just made a monk unarmed strike D8 and you're done. Yes, you can adjust it, but why did they not adjust it in this book? If you're going to do that for the fighter, why did they not put it here? Okay, right. We've got a bot. So, hello bot. We're going to select you for reporting and removal. And you are unwanted and unloved. Goodbye and gone. All right, bye-bye to the bot. What do you got here, Chris? Mercy Monk makes a great Wong Fei Hong. Yes, for anybody who is unaware, once upon a time in China, Wong Fei Hong, oh gosh, am I even going to pronounce it right? I'm going to lose my voice. I'm going to struggle to get words out of my mouth now. I totally agree. One of my favourite characters, played by Jet Li a number of times in the Once Upon a Time in China series of movies. Outstanding. Outstanding. One of the unusual features is the last feature they get, which I've already talked about, but I remember discussing it with one of my friends, and we just had to laugh at what was going on here. Fred, what? Most of best Glory's features are combat-based. I don't agree. I think the things that stood out for me are not combat-based. I felt like the things that stood out for me were not combat-based. That they were something else. So we're obviously disagreeing on a lot of stuff today. Oh, this is interesting. We're warming up. The Fey Wanderer gets some amazing combat features. Yeah, level 11 you get to conjure a Fey ally. Yes, that's true. Teleport. Yeah, but I'm not... See, when I say think of teleport, you can use it in combat, but not necessarily going to be the case. Do you know what I mean? Teleport is actually useful anytime. Covering long distances, getting to places you can't reach, particularly up. Don't have to climb now. Up we go. Teleport, right? At level 3, you get an extra damage die that all rangers get, except the Beastmaster. Yeah, look, I'm not talking about. I mean, look, a lot of the stuff that all of the ranger classes get as part of the update for this book. I'm not saying that they aren't great, but they're not specifically tied to the Fey Wanderer, are they? They're tied to the ranger overall, because the ranger got a few things that were extra, as far as I remember. Counterspell, yes. Look, as I said, all of the half casters and casters get expanded spell lists. I think it is a mistake to hand out counterspell and shield to more spellcasters myself, because these are dueling spells, and dueling spells shut down spellcasting for everybody. So now your dungeon master's using it, now you're using it, and then you've got people counterspelling counterspells if they can. Like it's one of the spells that I think is one of the best spells out there, counterspell. But it's one of the spells I think they should have never created. They should never have included it in the game. It should not have been there, in my opinion. I think it makes the game extremely unfun, frankly. That's just my opinion. Don't have to agree. The Bladesinger has always been broken. One of the best subclasses in the game. Yeah, but also the problem with being really broken is you may never get a chance to play with it unless you're playing Adventurers League, because your Dungeon Master will ban it, which is kind of a shame. I know one of my players wanted to play the Bladesinger, and I said no, because I could already tell what was percolating through his mind, and he was laughing when he was saying it too. So I do understand this. I'm not going to dispute that it's extremely good, because it is. Being just as fragile doesn't make any difference. If you can't hit the target when it's in the front line, it doesn't make any difference. And trust me, it does a pretty good job. There's a lot of things you can do to make sure that your fragile Bladesinger does never get hit. like the chances of getting hit is very slim. If you do it wrong, you could balls it up, but yeah. Sorry. Yeah, okay, so Chris, what do you got here? Early levels fighting from a distance, and when you get some good HP, then gets real fun. Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. Is a Bladesinger can kind of mix it up, get in and out without too much trouble, as far as I can tell, based on the sorts of things that are there. Okay, all right. The Watcher's Paladin have some abilities that are creature type specific. Yes, they are, you're right. But they do cover a lot of different creature types. So I mean, although you might say it's hamstringed, I would say it has still got enough. It's so broad, and I wouldn't say that it's niche completely. There's a lot of campaigns where it would apply. You are right, there would be some campaigns that a Watcher Paladin is probably not going to be any use to you. And that's actually because of the nature of the Watcher. The nature of the Watcher and the theme behind it is around protection from evil things, evil beings. So to a large extent. So and a different world, right? It's a Watcher of the world. So that's fine. It's actually fine that it have some sort of niche factor to it. Pig Pong, how's it going? 214. You use Roll20, so it's so it just throws all of the new rules and kind of nice. Okay, all right. So you pick and choose as you like. Okay. Yeah. Now, Gabby, 4E did have a lot of good stuff, but I played a lot of 4E, and I can assure you that we do not want to return to everything that 4E did, and a lot of the things that 4E did well aren't necessarily in the book. Okay, that's my opinion. If we were to go back to 4E, we would see the hobby destroyed, and it's not a good thing to do. There are aspects to 4E that are great, and most of them are not related to player character options. They're almost all Dungeon Master tools. Those are the ones that you want to save. The other ones, you probably don't. I guess I gotta buy Fizzbands next. Well, okay, I will talk about Fizzbands in the future. I am still a little bit on the fence about what to say about Fizzbands. There are some aspects to Fizzbands that are just magical, like awesome. And then there are other aspects that I just struggle with. Look, Wizards of the Coast has introduced 4E concepts and features before Xanathars, okay? They brought in 4E concepts during D&D Next, during the beta test and the alpha play test, which I was part of both. I know what I'm talking about, Gabby. I know what's going on here, and the reality is, it is a mistake. If they go too far, people will just... The biggest problem, people always assume that the reason people didn't play 4E is because it was too different from Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, that's part of the reason. But the other reason was because I had to run games for 4E, is I had so many players, there were so many people who wanted to play, and of a very young age, a lot of new players, and nobody wanted a Dungeon Master. As soon as you got to about level 4 or 5, everybody who was a Dungeon Master said, I am not touching this. And I know why, because I Dungeon Mastered that game. And I'm not shifting my opinion on that, frankly. This is one area that we are not going to see eye to eye with. Not to give you a hard time, but I'm not shifting on that at all. Chris, hit die to heal and death saving were all 4E. That's right. Exactly. That was there from that point. And they brought that over to 5E. You know, and it's not the only thing they brought over. Okay, essentially the concept of the long rest and the short rest were brought over from 4E as well. That's all part of that. The order is not that strong. Dungeon dudes rated it as a B tier average, and they're power gamers. Yes, they are power gamers. It is very situational. I know what I would do with the Order of the Scribe. You can disagree with me. So far in the campaign I'm playing, it has proven to be almost useless. Like there's very little I can do with it, unfortunately. Yeah, the Whisper Bard gets an E ranking, which is... Look, I'm not here to discuss what Dungeon Dudes thinks. I'm only here to discuss what I think. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, you don't. It's all good. Okay, and I know Dungeon Dudes is much more popular than I am. I don't dispute that, but I don't watch any of their content. Frankly, I stopped watching a lot of people's content because it was the same thing, and I often felt like they were simply pandering to a particular audience, and I'm not going to pander to anybody. Certainly not today. I'm going to say now that I feel like if you are a Dungeon Master, there's some stuff in here that should be all right. I do understand. Look, I am not going to dispute that everything in this book makes it harder for your monsters to survive as a Dungeon Master, and that your players will have a significant advantage, because they will. That is definitely the case. But there's some stuff in here which is like what should have happened in the player's handbook. Too many features are combat related. And a lot of these classes actually have stuff that is not combat related. Like, finally. Okay, we have an actual question from Ping Pong. Question. You said you DM in public games. I did. I don't anymore. I do not have time. I run a YouTube channel. I handed that over to somebody else. Do you mean like one-shots with random internet people? No, I mean in person. I did it in person. Or in public, like setting up games. Yes. So I was a local coordinator for Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League and game stores for a year and a bit when it first was developed for 5th edition. I was running games for 4E when they had public games. I would run the D&D encounters for kids in stores, vagabonds, various other places. And then I was all over the place. So I was dealing with the North Island of New Zealand, which is a big area to cover. And I was helping out a lot with the South Island as well, trying to get things moving. I did a lot of commuting, so to stop the commuting and to stop trying to teach people how to play the game and Dungeon Master, I decided the YouTube channel was the best way to go. So yes, I don't run public games online for people, and I have no desire to do so, and no time to do so either. So, but yes, for a number of years, I was running public games for people in game stores, in libraries, at conventions, and various other places. Send the wolves, Fred. Send in the wolves to devour the bot. Okay, all right. That's right. Oh, there it is. There's another bot showed up. Let's destroy the bot, shall we? Another botifying. I can't believe I got to the bottom of the chat. Frankly, I did not think that was going to be possible. Thank you, Nicola, for pointing it out. I've got it. All right, Chris, what do you got here? The Watcher Paladin reminds me of the Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm cartoon. Ah, okay. I can see that. I didn't follow everything regarding Mortal Kombat. I didn't really feel like Mortal Kombat had a particularly big story going on there. And I almost feel like the new Mortal Kombat movie almost hit its stride, because it was not actually about the tournament itself. It was about what was happening before the tournament. I actually like that idea. I just feel like maybe it didn't quite go far enough with turning it into a full-fledged story. Now, don't forget to say. Oh, hang on. Who's this? Trelene. Is it Trelene83? Look, if I got your name wrong, I do apologize. Don't forget, Second Wind for fighters was 4E design. That's right. Second Wind was. Very much so. Yeah, Cavalier was what first ed edition. That's right. I wasn't going to say anything, Pale Rider. Hello, SWAT Cats. And thank you, Pale Rider. Yeah. Look, there were some very bizarre things that went on with Paladins in the early days, and we won't go into all of them. Fred, get the heinous. Do I? The marked feature. Gabby, Pale Rider, I was talking about the marking feature and defender specialization. So marking a target is actually a 4E mechanic. There was actually a thing you could do in 4E that allowed you to mark a target, which made it easier to do. I believe it was more damage or hit harder or better chance of hitting that target. So you can mark that target. And that was 4E. So it is defender specialization. Look, none of the stuff they've put into Tasha's that's combat related is original. It is all taken from older versions of the game, and many of it from 4E. Many of it. Pale Rider, you just got here. I was just messing with... yeah, you can mess with Nicola by all means. We're not going to be an arm nasty because Nicola has actually taken the time and effort to type very frantically a lot of feedback into here. So yes. Now, if you're a player, this is certainly a book you would like, as long as your dungeon master will allow you to use it. If you're a dungeon master, I would get the players to buy the book and not buy it yourself, frankly. That would be my thoughts on this. Or don't worry about it at all and just keep playing the game you're playing. and it doesn't shift anything then. Chris, sorry Fred, I only said the things about dungeon dudes to point out their better ways to play than just combat. Yeah, look, I'm not going to give dungeon dudes a hard time about their ranking, because a lot of people are doing that, like tiers and ranking and so forth. But I just don't watch. I used to watch Nerdarchy and Taking 20 and Dungeon Dudes and WebDM. I stopped. I'd had enough. Nowadays, I am trying to find smaller creators who are doing something different. Because I've watched so many videos on Dungeons and Dragons, I'm just getting sick and tired of stuff. So now I look for people who are doing something very niche or are really open to a collaborative experience where we can get together and discuss stuff. So yeah, and I can assure you I have contacted all of the big YouTubers in the past about that sort of thing, and I totally understand them considering me too small. Quite rightly so. Okay. West T, you really like this book. I can understand. Look, if you're playing a character, I can really understand why you like this book. I get it. I took a week going through it. I understand. I get it. Yeah, other. Okay. Yep. West T. What Elemental Spirit. Page 11. Nice. Look, I don't want to necessarily I did not want to go specifically over mechanics in the book because I feel like everybody's done that already. Do you know what I mean? I just wanted to give you an overall concept of what's going on for me in terms of what I thought after actually taking my time to go through the book. Pale Rider, I have to mention riffs. Yes, you do. Fair enough. Because you might not have talked to AJ today. No. Yeah, I do name drop a lot. I've actually I think that's one of my weaknesses now. I wonder if that's an indication that I'm becoming a bit of a snob and an asshole. It might well be. It could well be. I think maybe we'll just say that it is. Do you know what I love is that some of them are actually getting their act together and I don't have to organise every single table. So you're going to start seeing Dungeon Master round tables and collaborations that aren't Dungeon Master round tables with people who would never have done it before. And I'm so pleased that's happening. I'm going to claim part of the reason that happened being me, but not all of it. Okay, what do you got here, Chris? Question. What pillar of play is your favourite? Combat, exploration, RP, or different? West T. I'm talking about puzzles in the Dungeon Master review of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It would be unfair to try to cover everything in one live stream. So we'll come back to that another day. Okay, it's not today. I'll talk about the puzzle section some of the time. Okay, so my favourite exploration is exploration. Now, to make it clear to you, I consider much of the social interaction aspect where you are negotiating, trying to gather information from an NPC or a monster or something like that. I also consider that exploration. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a subgroup of exploration. Those are that is, I would say, ultimately what Dave Arneson was looking at, and it's what Gary Gygax latched onto. So, given the sort of the nature of the game originally, I would say exploration. And it's not just exploring dungeons. It's not just exploring a world. Okay, It's about when you're exploring, you're dealing with other aspects, and it might be as simple as exploring what's going on for another character in the game, whether it be a player character, another player character played by another player, or the monsters and the NPCs. And I think that for me is so I would say exploration and RPG are wrapped together, and combat is sort of, look, combat is what happens when negotiation falls apart and you have to enter what's called aggressive negotiations, right? That's how I see it. No, you don't have to be sorry, West T. I'm just saying that if you want to talk about Dungeon Master stuff, I'm going to do that in its own live stream so that you get what you want, okay? I feel like it needs to have its own time. SWAT Cat, what do you got here? Is it wrong? I want to build a daredevil in 5e using the twilight domain for the cleric because they can see in the dark with the super sense of 300 feet. God. Well, I mean, is that really the issue? I think the biggest issue is that some of the other characters in the group are going to be doing the same thing. Yes, there is a resource tied to that, but it's not going to make any difference because you're just going to go and find a place to rest every time you need to get it back. And I would say probably one of the strongest, probably the strongest subclasses in there is the twilight and the peace domain cleric. Like, they are just so powerful of what they can do. That's right. Daredevil's character is blind. SWAT Cat. Absolutely. Okay, you got a question here, Nicola. Gabby, what do you got here? Same thing for monsters, NPCs for the monster box. Would have you made it in an original monster or what? Or both it from the older editions? Well, you know what? Look, some of you probably already know I was involved in the playtesting for the monster manual for 5e, and that's why my name's in the book. But I mean, I found that a lot of my feedback didn't necessarily change anything that WotC was doing anyway. And maybe that's because I was the only one saying it and everybody else was saying something else. Maybe the feedback was too late. But they did give us deadlines, so I do feel like those deadlines were met. I'm not really going to answer that question too much, Gabby, today. I think that's all I'm going to say with regard to that. I don't know if that's the question you were really asking and an answer you really wanted, but that's really all I can give you for today. Sorry. Okay. Pale Rider. I'm not familiar, but I'm making a daredevil character. Could never be wrong. I think a lot of people like the idea of playing Daredevil, and I can understand that. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons 5e is sort of synonymous with playing a superhero now. Chris, question: what is a good experience you may have had that was PvP? A good experience that I have had or might have had that was PvP. Well, frankly, there hasn't ever been one. I always found that when it looked like there was going to be PvP and an actual fight amongst player to player, that in some small way there was something that went wrong. Do you know what I mean? It might have only been a little bit of animosity, or we turned the tide and it wound up just being an argument rather than a between characters and then possibly between players as well. I don't think that myself or the people that I've played with have ever got to a point where they could actually do that successfully without it becoming a problem, which is why I'm not fond of PvP. Pardon me. I feel that PvP needs to be done between people who fully understand each other and know each other really well and understand the concept of role-playing, and I've just never seen it done successfully in any game that I've ever run or ever played in, unfortunately. That's sort of my opinion. Okay, so I am going to have to finish here. I do apologize. I was going to kind of go through the book, but it's been an hour and a half. I need to get myself organized. I need to rest my voice because I've got a very long, potentially, discussion with a few people very shortly, in a few hours. And it's going through who created Dungeons and Dragons and the history of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm going to need to save myself for that, so we'll come back to that some other time. And I will ensure to make sure that I do a video for Dungeon Masters on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in terms of a review. You will probably eventually see a flip through of the book very slowly while I talk. 4 pages of notes for players is a lot. That's just sort of how I think it's going to work with regard to that. Next week, what am I doing next week? I'm not completely decided. I could do Tasha's again, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to that a little bit later, and I'm either going to wind up doing Silvery Barbs, the spell, or I'm going to talk about the Game Master's book of non-player characters by Jeff Ashworth. I think that is the book that I'm going to talk about. It's the one that I really want to talk about. What's the Scabby? What unusual monster, NPC, non-main character archetype should have been in the game by now, do you think? The Phoenix. I think the Phoenix. Don't tell me the Phoenix is in a supplement already. That's not a Phoenix. That's a fiery elemental. Okay? The Phoenix. Should have seen the Phoenix. I mean, I've done a video with people that should have been there. There are other monsters. I've talked about this sort of thing before, but I think I have to agree with Josiah, Dungeon Dad, and AJ that the Phoenix was sadly missing. Yeah, so I need to get going. All right, so thank you for showing up and watching my very long live stream. I do apologize that I was not able to sort of stay around. So everybody's been really good about this. But thank you to my patrons. Thank you to everybody who's been watching my live streams and my other content. Now, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning, look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.